We have been studying out of Matthew chapter 24, and we're continuing on in Matthew chapter 24 with verse 33 of Matthew chapter 24. In the previous chapters, Jesus was telling his disciples about the end times. And a lot of people believe that the end time, that what Jesus talked about was about the prophecy in regards to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. But as the lesson writers point out, that much of what Jesus talked about had not happened as of yet, but were things that were going to happen in the future. And of course, everything kind of started everything off with the formation of the nation of Israel again in the 1940s. Now we're moving on to verse 33. It says, "So likewise ye, when ye shall see these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away." The fig tree has a regular pattern. The leaves appear, and then the summer follows. When you see the leaves, you know the summer is near. And that's like I think the Brantford pear trees are the first that start blossoming around here. Sadly, they don't actually have any pears, but they'll start blossoming. And then I know the last tree to get leaves are the pecan trees. I mean, they take forever. At least where I live, right here, they're the last tree to see leaves. But that spring, or of course, for me, I know spring is coming when I look outside and there's a bunch of robins, a bunch of really fat robins hopping around, that I know that spring is coming because the robins have returned. The fig tree was a common fruit in Israel. It is mentioned many times in the Old Testament, especially as a description of the abundance of the land. Sometimes figs or fig trees are also used as symbols or pictures. In passages like Jeremiah 24, 1-10, and Hosea 9:10, figs or fig trees are used as a representation of Israel. However, most Old Testament references to the fig tree use it as simply an example of agricultural blessing. It seems that Jesus' reference here is not so much as the figness of the tree, but the way that the tree follows reliable growth related to the seasons. This is especially evident with this passage and compared to Luke chapter 21, 29-31. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they are already budding, and you see and know for yourselves that summer is now near. So you also, when you see these things happening, know that the kingdom of God is near. Jesus assured that when the signs appeared, as he foretold, the abomination of desolation, followed by great tribulation, followed by signs in the heavens, his return to earth would follow. When a fig tree buds, there is an inevitable result. Summer is near and fruit is coming. In the same way, when these signs are seen, the coming of Jesus in glory with his church to this world will inevitably follow. Really, it was just as Daniel prophesied in Daniel 12:11. The end will come 1,290 days after the abomination of desolation. Jesus assures that the agonies of the Great Tribulation will not continue indefinitely. They will have an end. Up to this point, Jesus has given an important outline for the end-time events. There will arise catastrophes and persecutions, but those in themselves are not the sign of the end. There will arise a pivotal sign, the abomination of desolation. When the abomination of desolation appears, there are warnings to Israel to flee after the abomination. On the heels of the abomination of desolation comes great tribulation and cosmic disturbances. In culmination, Jesus Christ will return in glory to the earth. When speaking of Jesus saying, "As surely I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place," the statement of Jesus is one of the central reasons many have looked for all or most of the events of this chapter to be fulfilled in AD 70, approximately 40 years after Jesus spoke these words. Yet, as previously argued, to assert this is to greatly stretch the most natural interpretation of the abomination of desolation, of the severity of the Great Tribulation, of the cosmic signs, of the coming of the Son of Man. It is better to let those passages have their most natural meaning and to fit this promise into that framework. This generation Jesus meant cannot be the generation of the disciples, because they never saw Jesus return in glory as described in Matthew 24:30. It is undoubtedly the generation that sees these signs. These events in Jesus' return won't be on some 1,000-year timetable, but will happen in succession. It has been suggested that the word generation could be translated race, and it is a promise that the Jewish race would not be extinguished and would survive to the end. This would be a valuable promise, but some commentators, such as Franz, claim that this is an embarrassing wrong translation. Yet others, such as Adam Clark, who strongly believe the events of the chapter were almost all fulfilled in AD 70, writes, "This race, the Jews, will not cease from being a distinct people, till all the counsels of God relative to them and the Gentiles be fulfilled." Meaning that, of course, in a one way, it was a promise that despite all the machinations of these people trying to eradicate the Jews will never be eradicated. That their race will continue to exist. And that is comforting, because even now, it blows my mind how so many people can take Hamas's side over the Jews. That they blame Israel for Israel being attacked. That it's their fault. And it's like, you see so much anti-Semitism. And you know what? God said that his people would be hated. That there would be division. And that there would not be peace until he returns. And it's true, but God also promises that he will protect his people, which is good as far as it goes. Moving on to verse 36. "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." Here Jesus refers back to the original question, Matthew 24:3. "What will the sign of your coming be? His answer is somewhat unexpected, saying, "Of that day and hour no one knows." To give this idea the strongest emphasis, Jesus claimed that the knowledge was reserved for his Holy Father only. If Jesus himself, at least during his earthly ministry, did not know this day and hour, it emphasizes the foolishness of any latter person making certain predictions regarding the prophetic timetable. Based on what he told us about the abomination of desolation, we might have expected that the exact day or hour could be known. After all, Daniel set the day of Jesus' return as being exactly 1,290 days after the abomination of desolation. In this, there is a dilemma. How can the day of Jesus' coming be both completely unknown and at the same time be known to the day according to Daniel 12:11? Well, the truth is there's a catalyst, if you will, that starts everything, that brings everything to a close. And, you just don't know. You really don't know. Moving on to verse 37. "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall all the coming of the Son of Man be. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." Jesus explained what he meant by the days of Noah. It means life centered around normal things, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. In other words, life will be business as usual, reprobate, but perhaps usual. Eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. Bruce notes that some charge these with sinister meaning, eating hinting at gluttony because often used of beasts, though also in the sense of eating of men, marrying, giving in marriage, emphatically pointing to sexual license on both sides. Yet he comes to the conclusion, the idea rather seems to be that all things went on as usual, as if nothing was going to happen. And the thing is people expect that, that when Jesus returns, that the world won't be looking normal, but it will, at least into the normal world's eyes. Everybody going about their business, just like the rapture. When it finally happens, it's not going to be something leading up to it. It's just going to happen, and it'd be like a normal day, and all of a sudden, boom, it happens. This reminds me, of course, of things like, we just watched a special on television about April 19th, 1995, and the one thing you hear common is that it was just an ordinary day. I was just going to work. I was just saying hi to my friends. Look at 9/11. You have people saying it's just an ordinary day. That something unexpected, like this can happen, it doesn't have to be an extraordinary day for an extraordinary event. They always come unexpectedly. We should also remember that the days of Noah were also marked by violence and demonic oppression in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. And those in the days of Noah were warned, and judgment eventually came. To those who ignored the warnings, it came suddenly and unexpected. That the coming of the Son of Man takes place at an unknown time can only be true if, in fact, life seems to be going on pretty much as usual, just as in the days before the flood. In this, there is a dilemma. How can Jesus come to a business-as-usual world and a world experiencing the worst calamities ever seen on earth? Well, we'll get to that in a moment.